Today we're going to be replacing and repainting this front bumper on this Toyota Sienna. We are using a Toyota OEM raw bumper cover. I'll share with you the correct process for preparing raw plastic for paint. We'll also talk about the prepping procedure for a used bumper or an aftermarket pre-prime bumper. I'll also go over the entire painting process step by step because my goal in this video is to get you equipped with the information you need to tackle this job at home. So let's dig in and get started. Okay, so we got the bumper removed off this Toyota Sienna van. We're going to be replacing this lower engine cover. There's the new one there. Here's the new bumper. Now this is an OEM bumper, and a lot of times OEM bumpers come with an oily substance on it. What that is, it's a mold release agent. So when they make these bumpers, they put that substance on there so they can release it easily from the mold. You want to make sure that it gets cleaned off really well. The way we're going to do that is we're going to use soap and water. That's the first step in this process. This whole process is so you get the best adhesion possible. A lot of times people will not prep these out properly and that paint will peel off these bumper covers. If you're getting a used bumper cover or an aftermarket bumper cover, there's a whole different process for that. We'll go over some of those steps later on in this video if you've got a used bumper or an aftermarket pre-primed bumper. We like to use this Bulldog prep paste. Let me show you what this is. This is just a paste. It has a little bit of abrasives in it. You use it with water and you sand over the entire bumper with it and it scuffs it up without creating any deep scratches. A lot of times guys will want to use like 320 or 600 grit sandpaper, and what that does is that's going to dig into the plastic and create deeper scratches than you really want when you're prepping out these bumper covers. If you get too deep a scratch, then you're going to need to prime it, and that creates a whole nother set of problems and a lot more work for yourself. This paste is really nice to use. We use this with a gray scuff pad, so the scuff pad sands it as well along with the paste, and that gets a good prep on this. Now there's some other things you need to do before you apply your sealer. Now we don't have to apply primer over this bumper cover, but we are going to apply sealer over it. Let's prep this out and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so Darius has got this. He's scrubbing it down. We've taped up the area that we're not going to be painting. This is a textured portion of this bumper cover, but this is how he's sanding it. Cleaned it first, and you want to make sure you get in all these intricate areas, all these tabs. That's where it's going to peel. Anywhere you don't sand is where it would start peeling. This is kind of what it should look like. Should be a nice uniform dull finish. Should be nice and clean. And then he hosed it down. You got to get all that paste off of it because that's a little bit gritty. You want to make sure it's cleaned really well. This is what it should look like. Nice and uniform. So the next thing we're going to do is use an adhesion promoter over this. Always use an adhesion promoter on raw plastic. Always. The other thing you want to do is you always want to seal a bumper cover. A lot of guys say you don't necessarily need sealer, but on bumper covers you do. They get a lot of road debris, stones in your bumper cover. A sealer provides a little bit of cushion, so it helps prevent chipping of your bumper paint, creates a little cushion, a little flex. We got our sealer ready. We've also mixed up the base coat, so we're ready with our base coat. We washed it. We used the sanding paste with a scuff pad, gray scuff pad. Sanded it, has a nice uniform finish. We've masked off the area that we're not going to be painting. We wash it with isopropyl alcohol. Now what we need to do is I'm going to tack rag it clean. So I'm going to take one of these tack rags. This is just a sticky cloth. This is one's a little bit used, but we're going to open it up here. We're going to tack rag this off, remove any dust that has landed on this surface, get it nice and clean before we apply some adhesion promoter. So the sealer we mixed up was the U-Pol 2K sealer. So it's U-Pol, I think it's U-Pol 2253. It can be used as a primer, high build primer, primer surfacer, or sealer. If you mix that primer up 4 to 1 to 2, so 4 parts primer, 1 part activator, and then 2 parts reducer, you can use it as a sealer. Now we're ready to spray our adhesion promoter over it. So I typically use Bulldog adhesion promoter, but Today I'm using this U-Pull grip number 4. This is just an aerosol adhesion promoter. Definitely want to wear a respirator when you use this stuff. It's nasty. So make sure you get the edges. So what this does is it softens up that plastic just a little bit. I'm not crazy about how this is spraying on, but it'll work. This is the Inokraft Drizzle D1. This is a low volume, low pressure paint gun. We're going to spray our sealer and our base with this. We're going to run this at about 25 PSI. 3 turns out from closed on the fluid volume, and the fan pattern is wide open. I'm going to turn the air pressure down just a little bit. You want it to be as smooth as possible, nice and smooth. The smoother you get your sealer, the smoother your base coat's going to be, the smoother your clear coat's going to be. So we're going to let that flash off for about 10 to 15 minutes. We want it to start to cure. We want those chemicals to start to evaporate, and then we're going to apply our base with the same gun. Okay, we're looking at this to see if it's ready for base. You can see it's still a little wet there. Still a little wet here, so we're not quite ready for base. We want that to cure up just a little bit more. So we'll let this dry up just a little bit more before we start applying our base. This is dry now. It's ready to be sprayed, but we want to inspect it for any dust particles. I like to do it after I spray the sealer, after it's dried up a little bit, and then I like to do it after I spray the base. So that's one thing about sealer. It's another opportunity for dust to get in your sealer and get in your paint job. So we looked it over. There's a couple little dust particles right here. I took some 600 grit sandpaper and we just sanded those out lightly. We wiped it down with the tack cloth to remove any of that dust. And then there's another spot over here that we did as well. You can see where there's some scratches. There's a little particle of dust there and there. Now, after I spray the base on it, we'll inspect it again. This is going to help you get a clean paint job. Especially if you're doing this at home, you're not in a paint booth, this is an important step. So let's go ahead and spray our base now. Let's go over some different tips and techniques when you're spraying base coat. Now, as far as the gun settings, I'm going to give you a guide for your gun settings for base coat. You don't need as much air pressure when you're applying base. Somewhere between 15 and 25 PSI is sufficient, depending on how you like to spray. Your fan should be set as wide as you can get it without any distortion in your pattern. You could do a spray out, and if you have a nice uniform fan, you're good to go. On your fluid volume, I recommend starting 3 turns out from closed, so you close it all the way and you turn it 3 full turns out. You can make adjustments from there because these gun settings are just a guide. When you're spraying a high metallic finish, your technique is important. You want to overlap your passes around 70%. So when you make a pass, you want to overlap that previous pass about 70%. You want a consistent speed and a consistent distance from the panel when you're spraying. This is pretty much ready for the second coat. It looks nice and uniform. Color looks good. Everything looks pretty much covered. There's a few little light areas that we're going to spray. We're going to put one more coat on this. When you're spraying metallics like this, when you put your first coat on, they tend to look a little bit blotchy, but as they cure and dry, they clean up and the metallics look more uniform. If you're painting an aftermarket bumper cover that comes pre-primed, I would suggest that you machine sand that primer with 600 grit sandpaper. You want to remove a lot of that primer. You don't have to remove all of it. Then you want to apply your own primer. Usually a 2K primer is best over top of that. Then I have other videos on this channel that are going to help you with aftermarket bumpers and used bumpers. We're just going to tack rag this off, so we'll just wipe it down with this tack cloth. Make sure there's no dust on it, and then we'll be ready for some clear coat. We're going to spray with the Inokraft again. I was going to use a different gun, but I'm just going to go with this. This is a fantastic gun for clear coat and base coat. We're going to set our fluid volume at 3 turns out from close. So I close it in all the way, and then I'll do 3 full turns. Fan pattern is wide open, and then the air pressure we're going to run about 28 psi. These gun settings work really well with this low volume, low pressure paint gun, but it is just a guide. Nothing says you can't adjust it to suit the way you're spraying. And if you're using a different type of gun, your gun settings will be different. So when you're applying your clear coat, you want a medium to wet coat on your first coat. If it's not absolutely perfect, don't be concerned. We're going to put a second coat on, and that's where you can really slick it out. You want to be aware of your speed and your distance. You want a consistent speed and a consistent distance from the panel. Again, you want to overlap about 70%. This gives you a nice uniform clear coat. Smash that subscribe button if you're finding this information useful, and definitely share it with someone who needs this information. Listen, share with me down in the comments where you're from and what restoration or project you're working on. Here's a good look at it after the first coat. It came out beautiful. I like the way this gun is spraying this clear coat. There's a few little particles of dust. Nothing that can't be overcome on the second coat or with a cut and buff afterwards. After you spray the first coat of clear, you have to let that clear coat flash off or start to cure before you apply your second coat. Typically that's about 15 minutes. If you're in colder temperatures, it may be a little bit longer, but you always want to check the technical data sheet for the paint or clear coat you're using to give you the proper flash times. So this has flashed off about 15 minutes. It's a little bit cooler today, and it's ready for our second coat. Now on my second coat, I hit it just a little bit heavier, so you may see me slow down just a little bit. I'm really looking at that finish as I lay it down, wanting to get the slickest finish I can possibly get, or the correct amount of orange peel in this bumper cover. I also want to talk to you about reducers and activators. So in these cooler temperatures, you want to make sure you're using the correct activator for the temperature you're spraying in. Typically, this would be a fast activator in a cooler temperature. I rarely use fast activators. The quickest activator I might use is a medium, but it's very important in hot temperatures that you use the slowest activator or reducer possible, because that can cause issues in your paint job. So after you finish up your last coat of clear, there may be some imperfections in your clear coat that you need to correct. This can easily be done, and I've got plenty of videos that are going to show you how. You can click the link at the end of this video to check out one that'll show you how to cut and buff clear coat and make it perfect. Now this came out very nice. I'm really happy with the finish. You got a few little particles of dust, nothing that can't be corrected. Subscribe and watch this video now on Removing a Run.